Welcome to the Driving Change podcast on the Evergreen Podcast Network, where we live at the intersection of neuroscience and storytelling. If you love great stories and you love understanding the mindset it takes to be a world-class change agent, then join us as our fascinating guests from all walks of life unpack their unique journeys of perseverance and passion, of expertise and experience, and be inspired to use your own story to drive change. Welcome back to the Driving Change podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield. Today, we're excited to welcome a true pioneer in not just organizational development and leadership, but someone who had a big hand in many of our childhoods. Now, you're probably curious about that now, like what in the world could that mean? So Hugh Kincaid, his career spans over 40 years with the Walt Disney Company. And he actually played an integral role in shaping the company's culture and operational success all the way back to when it opened up in 1971 as part of the opening team. And when I found out that we could have Hugh on the show and learn all the secrets and all the magic behind the magic, I mean, he literally mixed up the pixie dust in the first cauldron, I think, back in the day in 1971. I think he was the first one to start sprinkling it across Central Florida that then made its way into all of our households growing up. During his time at Disney, Hugh helped establish the organizational development department. He guided teams. He came up with a performance excellence initiative. It's a culture shaping process that still remains central to Disney's success today in many ways. But he also, it goes beyond Disney. He's retired now, but he spent a lot of time consulting organizations worldwide on how to take some of these principles he learned, how to apply them to be more effective operationally and performance, and helping leaders and really helping folks take their role and apply it in a way that's more purpose-driven at work. Now, as always, as you guys know, this season, we're sponsored by BrainTrust, www.braintrustgrowth.com, sales performance and leadership development that is built on neuroscience and behavioral psychology. So if you'd like to check them out, give them a shout out, that'd be great. So, Hugh, that's a long wind-up to get you into from the bullpen to the mound here today, but I'm excited to have you on because not many of us know all the stories. They go all the way back to when they broke ground in Orlando and built the magic world of Disney there. So first of all, thank you for being on. Welcome to the show.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, first question is, you've seen a lot in your day. You've lived a long life here, a well-traveled life, but we want to know the origin story. So take us all the way back to your roots. Where do you come from? What was that like? Who inspired, influenced, and kind of molded your core values? And then how did that translate into a career at Disney?
Sure. I am from West Virginia. I was born up in a holler just outside of Charleston, West Virginia, and lived a magical childhood, quite frankly. I lived out in the woods. Friends and I would spend the summers out late, no danger there. And like I say, it was a magical childhood. My favorite thing to do was to draw. My preteen years was in the 60s, and that was an era when superheroes were really becoming popular in comic books. And I would run to the store and take a dime with me and get a comic book and copy the pictures out of it, and drew for all my friends, and had a great time doing it. My parents encouraged me. The art teachers at school encouraged me. So my big dream was to be a fine arts major in college, and probably end up being a art teacher in a high school somewhere. As luck would have it, I had an uncle who lived in Orlando, Florida, and he called up just before I graduated, and I had a scholarship to go to WVU to study fine arts. He called up and said, "Hey, you guys might want to move down here to Orlando because they're building a Disneyland down here, and there are going to be tons of jobs." Well, that's all I needed to hear: Disney, animator, artist. So I was all about that. So left the scholarship behind. The day after I graduated from high school, my entire family moved to Orlando. And I had hillbilly dreams of what that was going to be like. In my imagination, the front door of my house faced the Atlantic Ocean, and the back door faced the Gulf of Mexico, and Flipper was my pet and that sort of stuff. And as a pale hillbilly kid, the sunshine proved to be a little bit too much for me, so I didn't get to play with the porpoise and didn't go to the beach very much. But I did enroll in college there and took up a fine arts degree there, and hounded the people at Disney to give me a job. I remember my first visit to their employment center. Nobody was there. Pound on the door, please let me in, please let me in. Finally, somebody came to the door and I said, hey, I want to apply for a job. They said, well, can you let us build the place first? I was a whole year ahead of time. And so after they opened the employment office up, about 6 months later, I went out and was very enthusiastic and took my high schooler's portfolio of art to let a recruiter take a look and obviously give me a job as a Disney artist. I knew that was going to happen. He looked at it very patiently, and then he said, how'd you like to scoop ice cream?
Brilliant.
Brilliant. So anything to get my foot in the door. So I said, yes, absolutely. So that was my first job. I began scooping ice cream on Main Street before the park even opened up. And we had the grand opening and tons and tons of fun during that summer. And so one of the interesting things that happened to me as I was scooping ice cream is I had a friend who was responsible for bringing Disney executives from the little teeny Orlando airport to some bungalows that the company had when they flew in from California for meetings. So I had the opportunity to meet one of the founders of the company and his wife, and started talking to them about my big desire to be an artist in the company. His wife said, young man, let me give you some advice. Get yourself a business degree. That will serve you far better than the art degree in this company. And so I took that to heart, and I went out to the university, and I said to my advisor, hey, I want to swap my major. I want to major in business. So she was a very smart lady. She said, well, what part of business are you interested in? And I said, I don't know. I'm a fine arts major. What do I know? and so she said, well, I'll tell you what, there are two things that every single business, whether it's for-profit or not-for-profit, has to deal with. And one is money, and the other is people. The money part of it is, even if you're a not-for-profit, you've got money coming in and money going out. And when it comes to the people thing, you've got clients or customers, and you've got employees. And I said, okay, what's the people thing? Because I really suck at math. And so she said, that's called human resources. And so that began a long career in human resources for me. I got a degree. I had a boss, his name was Herb, who was very stern and renowned throughout the company as a very stern guy. He took a liking to me and gave me my first leadership position. When he did that, he said, I want you to get an MBA. And if you don't get your MBA, I'm going to fire you.
Oh, wow. There's some motivation.
So that was inspiration, very inspirational. And so I got an MBA so long ago that I now tell people that MBA stands for Masters of Business Antiquities.
Times sure have changed, that's for sure.
So Herb took a liking to me for whatever reason. I guess he was taking pity on the poor hillbilly kid. And he forced on me experiences that I wouldn't ordinarily do. I was a shy kid from back in the woods and most assuredly didn't like, public speaking and things like that. But Herb pushed me into new types of business and new learning. He took me, at the time that he promoted me, I was the fleet administrator for the company. I was responsible for the cars and trucks and buses and trains and monorails and that sort of stuff, making sure that their maintenance was good and that we had enough trucks and cars to to do the business that we had to do. He walked in one day and said, "Hey, I'm going to move you to our printing facility." What? You're gonna what? Yeah, I'm going to move you to our printing facility. I don't know anything about it. Oh, you'll learn. You'll learn. And so I had to go learn a whole new business. And he did that to me several times. And what he was doing is trying to round me out so that I had a broader understanding of what leadership is about and what the Disney business was about. And so having somebody to watch over me that way was very, very helpful for my career. But I still had a desire to do human resources work, especially since that was my main study in school. So I hounded the HR people the same as I hounded the recruiting people when I wanted to be an artist. And I finally got a job in HR, and I was working for the very first employee of Walt Disney World, a fellow named Phil Smith. Phil was an attorney, interestingly enough, from West Virginia also, who purchased all the land that Disney World sets on. He was a real estate attorney, and he worked for a non-de plume sort of company. They set up a shell company for him to do it so that the landowners around wouldn't know that Disney was buying all this property. And so I worked for him, and one day he called me into his office and he said, "Hugh, I don't think that we're using the potential of all of our employees to the degree that we need to. Yes, we have very talented people working in very, very interesting jobs and so on, but I really think that there's untapped leadership potential in these folks. And what I'd like for you to do is do some investigation, see what other companies are doing, and see if we can't build a model that will spread out over the entire company on how to really, really use the education and experience that folks have." So I said, "Okay, I'll do that." And I did quite a study. I hired another consultant to come into the company and teach us a little bit about it. And the first project that we lined up was back at the printing department again. I decided that having a little bit of knowledge of what went on there and a relationship with the people who worked there would help in this project. And what we ended up doing was revolutionary for those times. We set up something called a self-directed work team. And what that means is the employees themselves actually operate the business. They are themselves the managers, and they make decisions and do budgets and that sort of thing. Well, an interesting thing happened after about a year of helping these people, nurturing them and growing them in leadership. They did a capital budget presentation to Phil. And what they wanted more than anything else was to get a 4-color printing press that cost a couple of $1 million. Huge, huge piece of equipment. Phil explained to them that that probably wasn't going to happen, that people had come in to pitch that same purchase in years before. And here's the difficulty. The core business of Disney is not printing.
Right.
And so if the company is going to spend a couple of $1 million, they'll probably spend it on the guests and not on a printing press. So as a tribute to the learning that these folks had gone through and the seriousness that they took their jobs, they decided to shut themselves down, and they laid themselves off. And I got quizzed about that a lot afterwards because I did some speaking on it. And they said, "Isn't that a failure?" And I said, "No, it's not. These frontline people made decisions that their managers before them could not make."
Interesting.
And they were serious enough about their business that they saw what the right thing to do was, and they outsourced the printing that they did, and they all laid themselves off, and they all went on to better jobs, and it was a tribute to what they had learned in the year before. So what that did was that set me up for a real culture change process that happened at Disney called performance excellence. And the president of Parks and Resorts at that time, a fellow named Judson Green, wonderful, wonderful leader, took a look around at the company and saw that we had become very bureaucratic. We had become very siloed, and it was difficult to get business done. And so I was one of 13 folks who were tapped to help Judson have a renaissance in the Disney way of doing business and take us away from the bureaucracy that had grown. And the reason the bureaucracy grew was we were growing very rapidly.
Right.
We had built another park. Epcot had become a park, and the employee base had grown from just a few thousand to probably 10 or 15,000 by that time. And just as a little trivia point, during my tenure there, the employment base there had gone over 100,000 people in Orlando alone.
Wow.
It's the largest single site employer in the world. Now, there are other companies that had more employees, but not in one single site. When you get that many people together, bureaucracy is inevitable. You're just it's going to happen. So the performance excellence process that we went through was it was a culture change process, but I learned a lot there. One of the things that we committed to was not firing anybody, not laying anybody off because we were going through this change process. And we were committed to these employees, these leaders, that we would help them make the changes necessary to make them successsul. So 13 of us became executive coaches during that period. The president of the company was assigned, I was assigned to the president.
No pressure there.
Yeah, not at all, not at all. And the way we went through this process was to use a 360-degree assessment to give these folks a starting point on what they needed to work on. I think without that, people flounder around and not really know what it is that they need to work on. And it's difficult for an executive coach to help in that situation because, okay, where do we begin? So we hired a company to design a 360-degree assessment specifically for us. And the person who developed that came and taught us how to do it. One of the things that he shared with us was real live data from Disney leaders so that we could coach. Now the data that he gave us initially didn't have anybody's name on it. And so he trained us in the two extremes. What do you do if you get a 360-degree assessment back from somebody and they score at the top of everything? How in the world do you coach somebody who is perfect?
Yeah.
And so we talked about that and learned how to do that, knowing that this is a real person in the company. Then we had the other end of the scale, somebody whose marks didn't even show on the page. And you had
committed to not firing.
that we committed not to fire. And so we were all gambling on who's gonna draw this one to deliver feedback. Well, it was me. Eventually it showed up in my inbox and I had to do it. And it just so happened that it was an IT manager. And I'm really afraid of how this is gonna go. And I think the way the company handled him was a tribute to what they said they were going to do, and that's not fire anybody, but give them a chance to make change. So I went to the person and delivered their feedback, and the way that worked is I gave them the report. I explained the report, gave them the report to read, went away for about a half hour or 45 minutes, and then came back and debriefed it. And when I came back, the poor guy was crying. He knew his career was over. And I convinced him, no, that's not the purpose of this. This is to help you grow. And prior to my retirement, he was still working there because he had learned lessons that were very valuable to make changes and to become a better leader. And so having a jumping off place and then having a company that's committed to helping you make that change and giving you the resources to do it is absolutely vital. So one of the things that I learned in that process was being intentional about what you do, and specifically being intentional about your leadership. want to jump back to an event that happened when I was in my 30s and I was the fleet administrator. There was a gentleman who worked for me who was a tank commander in World War II and the Korean War. His name was Jason. And Jason was an irascible guy, just exactly what you would imagine a major who was a tank commander might be. And he and I would debate all the time. His favorite thing to say to me, and I've said it to many people since, is we would be in the heat of a discussion, and he would say to me, "Do you know that, or do you just think that?" On any fact at all.
Right.
So one day he comes in and he says, "Hugh, I need to go out on medical leave, and the doctor says I need to be out for 9 weeks." And so I said, "Okay, we'll put you out. I'll do the paperwork." And this is pre-HIPAA. So I asked him what was wrong. He said he had a hernia. So, okay, all right. So Jason goes away on his medical leave. And when he comes back, he works the first day, his whole shift. And at the end of the day, he comes in and he puts his feet up on my desk, sits back in the chair, and he said, "I decided something, Hugh." I said, "What's that, Jason?" He said, "I decided I'm going to retire." "Really? What's your thought process? Why are you choosing now to retire?" And he said, "Well, I turned 62 next week, and being away from you for 9 weeks made it clear to me that I'd much rather go fishing and chasing girls around than to be fooling around here with you." "Okay, all right, you're a funny guy." So we talked more about what he was going to do in retirement. And I said, "How soon do you want me to put the paperwork through?" And he said, "Well, yesterday it was too late. I want to do it right away." "Okay, all right. I'll place the paperwork in the retirement office tomorrow." So we talked a little bit more, and he said, "Okay, I'm going to go home now." He stood up and turned and walked away from my desk and fell over in the floor. And I luckily, the first aid station where the EMTs work is within sight of my office. I call 911. They show up just in a few seconds. He's not awake yet. They said, "We need to take him to the hospital." So they take him to the hospital. I said, "I'm going to chase you down because Jason doesn't have any family." So I go to the hospital with him, again, pre-HIPAA days. He's in the emergency room. I'm not learning anything. They move him to intensive care. I see a doctor in there working on him. The doctor comes out and I said, "Doc, Jason works for me and he doesn't have a family. And if you need somebody to act as next of kin, I'd be happy to do that." So the doctor said, "Well, if you're going to be his next of kin, you need to know that he's going to die."
Wow.
So I was stunned, and I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, he's got a tumor in his brain, and we're going to take it out, but it's terminal." Well, that was very shocking. I'm in my 30s, and this is boggling my mind. So my wife and I took care of Jason for many months. He was in a rehab facility. And we would take him out to dinner and so on and so forth. And we eventually found that he did have a brother in Minnesota, and the brother came and took him home. And sure enough, Jason passed away. That had a very profound effect on me. And I learned a very valuable lesson there. And that is, none of us are promised tomorrow. And so if there's something important in your life that you need to do, you need to do it today, because you never know. Like Jason, tomorrow might not happen for you. That's a lesson that I taught these folks when I would meet with these type A leaders in our company who were all about staying at work and getting ahead and that sort of stuff. It's interesting, as an HR person, I frequently had to threaten discipline on people who would not go home, who would not go on vacations, that sort of stuff, because they were so committed to what Disney was about and the job that they were doing. So this valuable lesson that I learned from Jason drove me to decide that when I turn 55, I'm going to retire. I'm going to spend time with my family. And I also had a renewed insistence that every year my family and I would go on vacation and go places. So I was very committed. Family, very, very, very important to me. So another lesson that I learned in the performance excellence process is cultural change. And the performance excellence process, bar none, is the most successful change process I've ever seen in any organization. it completely changed the way business was done in the company, and so it was very, very successful. But what I learned is culture change, and corporate culture change in particular, won't happen unless you have personal change. People have to commit to changing their behaviors in alignment with the values of the company, and you have to teach people how to do that. And so that's something that I took into my private practice, and I have been executive coaching ever since the early 90s. And that's one of the valuable lessons that I share with organizations is we have to talk to every individual in the company and express to them how important it is that they personally make changes from what they're doing. So I went from the performance excellence thing to being an HR executive, and that was a natural progression, because I went from the performance excellence thing to working on a project to do a culture change with the entertainment division at Disney. Now, I don't know if you've met a lot of entertainment people, but they are definitely not corporate. and these creative people at Disney in particular were definitely not corporate and didn't really like being talked about in business terms.
Right.
So I learned a great deal from those folks. As a matter of fact, my team and I were unusual in that we spent about 15 years in support of the entertainment and other creative areas at Disney that the normal HR people shunned. No, I don't want to go over there and work. Those people are crazy. Yeah, and I am too. Thank you very much.
Right.
And so I spent about 10 years leading a team that dealt with all kinds of creative people from merchandise. They designed the merchandise, they designed the packaging, marketing, foods, the people who created the different dishes that were served in the restaurants, and the menus and the design of the restaurants and so on, because we knew what it took to nurture the creative juices in these folks without squashing them with rules and regulations. We had a mission as HR people to make sure that we were doing the personnel stuff exactly the way the company expected, but we also knew how to be great partners with creative people.
Yeah.
And we ended up being very good business partners and being on the executive committees of these divisions. During that time, had an interesting thing happen. Disney does, or did in those days, lots of press events to introduce new movies, to introduce new attractions in the parks. And for Mickey's 60th birthday, I got a phone call. And the marketing department, who I had volunteered with for years and years and years, asked me if I would like to host some 8 to 10-year-old children from West Virginia who were coming with underprivileged children from all over the country to Disney to celebrate Mickey's 60th anniversary. I said, yes, absolutely. That's a thrill of a lifetime for me to see kids my age and talk to them about what I'd seen and done and that sort of thing, and let them meet Mickey. So these kids came, and I built a really close relationship. The kids were part of something called Operation Strong Mountaineer. And again, they were mostly 8-year-olds and a couple of chaperones, a guy chaperone and a girl chaperone. The guy called me up before the kids came down and said, we've got a problem here. These kids don't have any clothes to wear. They don't have any shoes to wear, and so on. So I'd already been prepped. Don't fall for this, because if we give too much to one of the groups, other groups will complain. So I said, not any clothes, not any shoes. I hope you find some. Hung up the phone real quick. And then guilt poured over me, being the hillbilly that I am. And I called him back and I said, okay, you can't tell anybody, but what can we do? So what we decided to do was get the kids' sizes from their mothers, and I would go to different organizations in Orlando and get them brand new clothes because they'd never had anything brand new. But there was one kid, a little boy named Louis, who the chaperone never sent me his sizes. So I finally called up the chaperone and I said, look, Louis is going to be without any clothes and the rest of the kids are going to get some if you don't get me his sizes. And the chaperone said, well, here's the problem. Louis' mom doesn't know what size clothes he wears. And I said, how is it possible that a mom doesn't know what size clothes their child wears? And he said, well, here's the situation. They live in the poorest county in the whole United States, and she has to go dumpster diving to get him clothes. I said, oh my gosh, please. I said, find out. So they got me his sizes finally. And the kids come down, and again, strange cultures. A friend of mine was chaperoning kids from New York City. I'm chaperoning these kids from the backwoods of West Virginia. We happened to get on the bus together, the bus from the airport to Disney World. As we're approaching the toll booth to get there, the kids from West Virginia start yelling, look, it's Disney World, it's Disney World. The kids from New York City are cracking up laughing, you bunch of hicks. We get to the resort that they're going to stay in, and the kids from New York are daring each other to step in the grass because they'd never seen grass before, and the hillbilly kids got their revenge for laughing at them for that. What that turned into was a 20-year relationship that I had with Operation Strong Mountaineer, and Disney was very, very generous in helping me provide the families who live in that area with clothes and at Christmas time toys and that sort of thing. And the lesson that I learned there is, there's just not enough kindness in this world, and especially today. It seems like the world has become increasingly more crass, and it's harder and harder to find kindness. You have to really go look for it. And I live in a place here in Tennessee that, after having traveled all around the world, I am firmly of the belief that the kindest people in the world live here. This is a very, very kind community, and they care a lot for you.
What would you say? I'm curious. One of the things I was curious about you was, Walt Disney World opened, what, in 1970, 71?
1971, October the 1st, 1971.
And you saw it from, scooping ice cream all the way to being an executive leader through all those years. We've all studied business and companies and stuff like that are in that field. Some would say that the culture has changed drastically with any company.
Yeah.
That has that kind of success for that kind of a run. I'm just curious, from an insider's perspective, would you say the culture has changed, and what has changed about it, if it has? What values have persisted versus what maybe have not, and why? And then what happens in any organization when there are some of those ebbs and flows, where from bureaucracy earlier, but when you get into the values piece and what the company stands for, and you got decades long people and different leaders coming in and out of it, it's inevitably going to ebb and flow. I'm just curious how you would feel about that with Disney specifically.
Absolutely. So a little aside here, one of the hobbies that I've had since I was a teenager is genealogy. And I've given great thought to the very concept that you're talking about. And I think genealogy is a good way to explain it. I had my dad as a role model for me. He was the head of our family. And as an even more highly respected patriarch of my family was my grandfather. I knew my grandfather. My grandfather shared with me the values that he grew up with, and so on. I really only heard stories about his father, and only vaguely heard stories about my great-great-grandfather. If you take that concept and apply it to an organization, when I started working there in 1970, I worked for people who worked for Walt.
Right.
They knew him personally, and they knew what he stood for. They knew his values. They knew what he wanted out of the company and how he wanted the guests to be treated and so on. So I'm like the grandchild of that. Those leaders that I worked for were my fathers in this company because their father was Walt. And as you get further and further away from the founder of an organization, the stories about them, the stories about their values and so on become more and more distant. And other influences come into play. Just prior to the performance excellence culture change that we did, we had a big influx of people that quite frankly, we recruited to come into the company because they had experience in other companies. From other hotel companies and other entertainment companies. We want you to come into the company. We value what you've learned someplace else. And what happened was the values of our company changed because of it. Yep. And fortunately, Judson Green, our president, recognized that that was not a good thing. And so we had to be very intentional about getting back to the values that Walt had. Well, time has now progressed even further. I mean, I've been retired I haven't been there since 2008. I've been here in Tennessee since 2008. And it has progressed way further down the road because of current influences on the company. The society has changed and the leaders are responding to that. And quite frankly, I do hear people say we need to put Walt back into the Walt Disney Company.
Interesting.
And to some degree, I feel that way myself because, I learned from people who worked for Walt. But what's the right answer? It's above my pay grade. I don't know what the right answer for that is, but I do know that Walt and the people who worked for Walt made the company very, very successful. And the way that they did it was to earn the trust of the customers and the families who Walt was in their living room every Sunday night. Uncle Walt was here. And so they knew him personally, or at least it felt like they did.
Yeah.
So I think that's a natural progression as time goes on in companies. They lose sight of the founder. And many times that's a very sad and difficult thing.
Yeah, it's not just a Disney. Like, you think about really any successful organization, it happens to it. And you can see it as it's happening. And I love your analogy of the genealogy because that's such a good example of what to think through on that. And inevitably, if you don't course correct back to what your constituency, in this case, your core customers desire from you, you will eventually go the way of Blockbuster, right? You're gonna go away based on either lack of divergent thinking and innovation or a complete clash with the values of your customer base. At some point, you either got to find a new customer base who believes what you believe, the new belief that you believe, or you'll fade into. We talked to some of the Chick-fil-A folks, similar thing, right? With True and Kathy, and they're going through that same progression now, and they're in the third generation of leadership. So I just like it. It's a fascinating. I'm a founder of my company, and it's a watch out. It's like, can you build something? The one thing that I always loved about Disney, and I don't think they've lost the core elements of this, is what Walt believed so much was his combination of imagination, storytelling, and experience. To get people to think about something in such a powerfully imaginative way that they could start to believe they could create something that they maybe didn't only dream of. Like, he had this magical way of making you believe that you could be creative, that you could imagine a world that was better than the one you were in today, and you could actually do something about it. That, I felt like that was always his magic. And he was able to build a company that attracted people to that. I don't think that part has changed. I think Disney gets out there with 55 different things they're doing now, and they're getting probably way more scattered in what they're trying to deliver than Walt would have ever allowed them to do from a diversity of thought and business model. I would think. I don't know. I'm curious what your thoughts on that.
I couldn't agree with that more. The more that you acquire other companies, the more diluted your value system has to be, because those companies that you've acquired have a different set of values. And Walt was very, very focused on the customer. What does the customer want from us? What do they expect from us? Interesting little story about that. Walt had very particular ideas about what appearance guidelines should be. you worked there in the college program. You know that they were very strict about certain things. Well, that happened because when he opened Disneyland, was in the 50s, and ladies had very strange beehive hairdos, and like today, like different color hair and so on. And he was trying to tell a story with his park. When you walk down Main Street, you're in the 1890s, and he's walking along seeing these ladies with beehive hairdos and long pink fingernails and that sort of stuff. And he said, we need for the park to tell the story, and not for the employees to be the story. They play a role in the story. So he said, okay, no facial hair on guys, no beehive hairdos for the ladies, and so on. And that was true for a long time. And he was criticized a lot because he had a mustache.
Right.
So it just so happened that in the late 90s, the president of the company came to me and said, hey, can you find out what the guests think about facial hair on guys? Because, we're getting pushback and that sort of thing. And so I did focus groups with the guests. And one of the focus groups, it took place in February. And in February, there's this interesting thing that happens at Daytona Beach. It's called Bike Week. One of the focus groups had a bunch of bikers with long beards and tattoos and all that. And I get to the question about facial hair with them. And I said, what do you think about facial hair on guys? And they really surprised me. They said, no, dude, no, that's who we are. That's not who you are. Maybe a nicely trimmed mustache, but no beards, no tattoos, none of that sort of stuff. So I went to the president and I explained it to him. And he said, okay, we're going to change and we're going to allow guys to grow a mustache. So I happened to be the first Parks and Resorts employee in the world to have a mustache because I knew ahead of time what was happening. The rule was you can have a mustache, but you can't grow a mustache. So I came back from vacation with a mustache. The important thing about that story is we were concerned what the guests wanted, what the guests expected, and that sort of thing. And so no matter what decision happened at Disney, at least while I was there, the most important question that got asked, and it got asked after all the debate and all the discussion about whatever the change was going to be, is how's this going to impact the guest? What are they going to think about it? And how can we maintain our relationship with them through whatever the change was going to be? So yeah, focusing away from yourself on your client, on your guest, on your customer is very, very important, very important.
And I think what Walt did a great job, and the first wave of leaders did, was any company would probably say the same thing. Oh yeah, put the customer at the center. We do customer centricity, and we do all. But it's one thing to say, well, we want the customer to like what we're giving them, so we want to tell them they should like what we're giving them. Walt was maniacal, it seemed like, about, no, we want to create an experience for them that is, in some cases, beyond what they had only even hoped that they could ever have, and make it affordable. So the wonder, the sense of wonder and awe that he seemed to be so passionate, almost like he was addicted to creating an environment to have people come in and their jaw drop and their eyes open, and kids, right? That was
absolutely.
That was his catnip, it seemed like, was to create that.
That's absolutely true. And to make sure that we guarded the magic.
Yeah.
I've done many business workshops and taken business people through the different parks, Disneyland, Disney World. And almost every single time, some hard-bitten business guy would say, Hugh, come on, how many Mickeys are there? And my answer was always the same. There's one Mickey. There's one Mickey Mouse. Don't feed me that. Come on. I got up this morning and Mickey is in the lobby of the hotel. And then I go over to Tomorrowland and he's dressed in a spacesuit. And then I go over to Frontierland and he's in a cowboy outfit. You're telling me there's only one Mickey Mouse? Yeah, there's only one Mickey Mouse. You were in all those places and there's only one of you. So how would you explain that? There is one Mickey Mouse. That's it.
Yeah.
So guarding the magic is another key thing to preserving the wonder that people feel when they come to our parks and resorts. And you notice I just said our parks and resorts.
Yeah, you're still.
I've been away for a few years now since COVID. They said, okay, we don't need consultants anymore. And I still have to say our company, because you spend a lifetime someplace, it becomes a part of your family and who you are.
Yeah, you can't stop drinking that Kool-Aid. I mean,
No, not at
you
all.
literally have pixie dust in your veins at this point, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting in my retired life and in my private practice, Mickey still holds sway over what my clients and what my family think about when I talk about business and what I learned there. And as a matter of fact, in my community here, I do pro bono work to help the small businesses grow here. And I use all these concepts that I learned from Mickey Mouse.
Yep.
To help them understand how to grow their little business into something that they could probably never dream of. And Mickey has had a profound impact on my life. As a matter of fact, I frequently, and I think I started this out by saying, I don't know how this hillbilly kid got here. The last 10 years that I spent with Disney, I spent it with the Disney Institute, which is a part of the organization that goes out and shares Disney's business practices with other types of organizations, big, small, corporate, governmental, and so on. And I frequently would find myself in a conversation with a CEO of a company and go, I don't understand why this guy would listen to me. I'm just a hillbilly kid from West Virginia. and one of the really profound ones was the company asked me to go do some research in South Africa and do some focus groups there to help them prepare for World Cup soccer that was coming. And I got to meet with the governors of all 9 provinces and talk with them. And one of the evenings, they threw a big banquet and they had a huge circus tent on the edge of the Kalahari Desert. And I'm standing in the Kalahari Desert, looking up at the sky and seeing the Southern Cross and other constellations you can't see in this neck of the woods. And I really, really profoundly said, I don't know how this happened to me. I really, really don't know how this happened to me. Which, quite frankly, brings me back around to the intentionality thing. We can and should be intentional about how we live our lives and so on. But lots and lots of unintentional things happen to us. And so if I go back to the kid who wanted to be an artist at Disney and I looked at the path ahead of me, there's no way that I'm going to know the twists and turns that are going to happen. And lots of twists and turns happen for me. But standing at this end of my career and looking back, it looks like a straight shot.
Right.
Because I used all these unintentional things to intentionally learn from the good things that happened to me, to the difficult things that happened to me, to, quite frankly, the bad ones as well. You have to learn from every single one of these twists and turns in your life. And sooner or later, you might possibly, and I was blessed to do it, help others see how they can be successful and take advantage of the unintentional things that happen to them very intentionally.
I love that. That's a great way to close. I think for all of us from a perspective standpoint is, we coach a lot of business leaders and executives and you rarely hear somebody, when they're being eulogized, people get up and start talking about all the amazing business accomplishments that they achieved. You hear people get up and talk about the impact they had on other people. That's what you hear. If you lived a well-lived life, right? Is
Indeed.
the impact you have on other people. And your point is we're all on the journey. Some things we're trying to do intentionally, but if you don't pay attention to the unintentional things that happen to us that are probably there on purpose, then you're going to miss out on an opportunity to take a couple left and right turns that'll lead you closer to your destiny where you were supposed to be anyway. And it's all a path that you're supposed to be on if you believe that. And if you're putting good stuff out, I think you're going to get more and more of those unintentional things happen to you that allow you to add more value to other people along the journey. And you've certainly spent a career and a life doing that. So thank you for that.
Oh, it has been a thrill of a lifetime to have these unintentional things happen to me, because I was going to be an artist.
Right.
And I ended up having great adventures beyond that and working with some really great people for a really, really great company and having a really great boss, Mickey Mouse, who has been very exceptional in taking care of me as one of the cast members there. And yeah, it's been great.
Well, you think about this, and I'm going to go cheesy on you here, but like you wanted to be an artist, but it turned out you just had people as your paintbrush.
Indeed.
You got to build a mosaic out of your life of people as opposed to paintings or caricatures. And I think that's wow, what a cool what a cool twist that ended up being for you.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, it's very humbling for me, and humility is an important leadership trait, and
For sure.
Yeah, a life well lived. That's a good way to look at it. And now I get to be now in my retirement. I get to be intentional with my grandchildren, and I want to give you another one of my grandfather's quotes, and that is, "We as parents are our mission is to be memories for our children." And all these lessons learned and whatever I've passed on to any leaders in any other companies, hopefully those are memories that they have and change behavior because of it. And so now I'm trying to make memories for my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And that's a good way to be intentional in retirement.
Yeah, isn't that cool to think that, one day your grandkids or great grandkids will start telling stories about Grandpa Hugh and great Grandpa Hugh and the impact he made. And that gets me excited for
Oh
the
yeah,
next
man.
chapter, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what it's about right there.
That is. Well, Hugh, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I really enjoyed the conversation and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, it's been a pleasure for me. Thank you so much for inviting me.